Well, it goes back to a concept of truth, that there are things that actually are true and are not. There are things that work and don't work. Doesn't matter what you think about it. And let's take government for a minute, because we open by saying there are certain principles that you want to apply in government. Let's go from government to science. There are science principles. You know, I can say all day long, I don't agree with the principle of gravity. I don't like it. I think it's wrong. I want to be able to...
It's really been holding me back my whole life.
That's right.
I feel like I should be able to jump higher. I feel like gravity is just an oppressive force. And so I'm voting against gravity. That's my new vote. I vote that we ban gravity.
Oh, I just don't think it applies to me. I think I can jump off a 50-story building, and when I hit the sidewalk, I won't die. That's crazy.
Well, so that's not just a violation of gravity. That's a violation of, I think, physics, too. When force meets force and you're softer, I think there's a compression that happens.
There's a compression.
So there's a lot of things involved.
But it goes back to truth. There are things that are true and that are not true. There are things that will work and won't work regardless of your feelings. And just as we recognize that in science, you have the laws of gravitation, you have the laws of thermodynamics, you have the laws of gases. The same thing works in government. There are certain things that will work, certain things that won't work. You want to find those principles, and those principles will work for any nation, anywhere, any point in time. You know, gravity is just as important in the northern hemisphere as the southern hemisphere. Doesn't matter. It's universal. And so these are the principles that we're going to cover in future lessons. These are principles that apply for all people, all languages. It doesn't matter where you are. These principles will work if they're applied. They are not relevant to one people that exclude another. So these are principles of truth that stand across time.
So whether you're from the northern hemisphere, the southern hemisphere, you're from the east or the west, principles don't fundamentally change. And one of the things about truth is truth doesn't change over time. People sometimes look and go, well, that was true for them, it's not true for us. Well, if truth changes, it wasn't really truth. Truth is something that is universal and will be consistent throughout human history. And this is one of the things, even as we study human nature, this is one of the reasons that government has been consistent with what works and what doesn't work. Where certain forms of government tend to lead to tyrants and certain forms don't, it's because there are certain principles and truths that are universal and will always be true. And this is where, when we dive in over the next several lessons, there's a lot of things that we will dig into with truth, explaining why certain principles have never worked, certain principles have been very successful, even looking at America.
Well, let me add something to what you're saying, because those principles are key. And when you look at America, as you mentioned earlier, we've had the Constitution in America now for multiple centuries, and the average length of a Constitution is 17 years. So think about over 2 centuries ago, what was life like? They had horses. There was no electricity. They had no communication except for what they could do with quill and ink. So how is it that a Constitution that was written back then with none of the technology we have today still works? It's because they did not write about the specifics of the day. They used principles that are timeless. And those principles have not changed. That's why that Constitution still works in America today, just like it did 2 centuries ago, because it's not built on the specifics of technology. It's built on timeless principles and truths that do not change with time.
That's what we need to get into and cover over the next several sessions, because that's the kind of stuff that, if those are applied, regardless of the nation you live in, those are things that can help people be successful.